Okay, welcome back to the Desert Harvest podcast. We are speaking usually about Arizona's culinary bounty. And today, we may stray a little far afield. So, buongiorno, Oren, it's so good to see you. Allora, how are you doing?
Hey, pal, you were in Italy, not me. Don't pretend like I know what. I mean, I have no clue what you're saying right now, pal.
Well, let me tell you, we'd had just an extraordinary like week out there, Oren. We went out, we were in Rome, and then we were in Florence, and I would say 80% of my waking hours were spent eating something somewhere along this trip.
I'm
It was
very
just so
envious,
cool.
my friend.
And you know what? I'm here to tell you, you should be. It was all it was cracked up to be. And I would say, uh, relative to my day to day in my life here in Arizona versus like my vacation life, we did walk more than usual.
hmm
I would say that that was a meaningful difference in terms of activity, but I definitely ate more than usual in this trip. And I
So
have
did you
to,
come back like feeling like crap or what?
well, that's what I want to report to you. And let me just focus on pizza and gelato.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
my wife seemed to think it was funny to snap a picture every day of me with an ice cream in my face because I there was gelato everywhere and I love ice cream and pizza. Now, if I ate pizza and I literally had some form of pizza, if it wasn't an actual pizza, it was a sandwich, which was a pizza folded on itself. I mean, basically, it was the same
Right.
ingredients, bread, cheese, tomato in some way, shape, or
By
form.
the way,
And
I just gained 10 pounds listening to you talk about this.
so we're talking about a trip that, yes, there was perhaps twice to three times as much walking as might be in an ordinary day, accompanied by twice to three times as much eating. But if I had the same amount of pizza that I had in Italy here, I will tell you that I would have been sluggish. And here's the main thing that I noticed about my experience eating as much bread as I did. And this is common. I think this story is not unique to me, was bloating. I did not feel bloated with at all. And
Right.
look, I'm not going to claim scientific knowledge that I don't have or some sort of expertise, but just given my interest, my social media feed obviously likes to serve me up lots of information about food and the difference between food regionally, between countries, and so on and so forth. But I'm just reporting to you as an eater that I
hmm
ate a ton. I didn't feel as heavy and bloated. And when I came back, I mean, this is after like a day after the plane ride, I was effectively the same weight as when I left. And I will tell you, if I had done that locally to where I'm at, there's no way that the same diet would have produced the same result.
Well, didn't it's so cool and I'm glad you were able to experience that. The wasn't that movie like Eat, Pray, Love or one of those, it
Hmm.
took place in Italy, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so I mean it makes sense that to detox and to go and get some, great, obviously great tasting food with made with quality ingredients, but also without all the shit we eat over here, you know, mixed into it that you don't even know about. And so that's just and that's why I love like Don Garrow's bread
Yes.
and why we used his methods at Farm Boy because you could eat a barbecue brisket sandwich
Hmm.
and not feel like, ugh, I gotta
Yeah,
go
right.
take a
Yeah.
nap, like it's clean food as people can call it. And that means there's not all these additives in it. And I would imagine the artisans in Italy, the chefs, and it would be anathema to them to put some of this shit into food. Like for them to see flour that has all these additives would probably be like they would it would be like repulsive to them.
And what I have to think is the case is that at the system level, in terms of like what are the rules, that there has to be a difference in the inputs that are protected systemically. And here's what I mean by that. Like there's this social media influence. I don't even know her real name. She goes by Food Babe. And she was up in DC and she was showing products sold in the United States and products sold in Europe by the same company under the same names. And she shows the list of ingredients in the products that get sold here and the list of that same product in Europe. And the list is extraordinarily different. There's like a whole bunch of different ingredients in the US version compared to the European version. And when it comes to bread, Siri must have been listening to me. I got videos on social media. So if it's on the internet, it's got to be true, right? But this additive called potassium bromate is
Hmm.
something that's apparently allowed in the United States when it comes to bread, flour. That's not allowed in Europe. In fact, since 1990,
Yeah,
it's
it's
been
considered a
yeah.
toxic chemical in Europe since 1990, and we as Americans have it in almost all the store-bought bread.
So what I'm saying is that when I report my experience of being, eating bread and pizza as much as I did and feeling different, when I think, well, was it just psychological? I'm on vacation and I'm, relaxed and I'm walking a
Hmm.
lot. Surely all those things come into play. But when I come back and look into some of the things that um, are different between what's just in the mix of ingredients in Italy versus what's generally in the mix of ingredients here. Um, it's so clear to me that that's a real thing. Like whatever potassium bromate is exactly, if that lives in our bread here, it produces a feeling in my body, an inflammation response, a
Hmm.
bloating that I did not experience, over there. And you and I, we consume a lot of the same information. I mean, there's an awful lot of people talking about this very thing.
Well, yeah, and I want to go back to the food you ate in Italy, but I also you shared a great podcast episode with me. I think the podcast is The Ultimate Human.
Yeah, Gary
Um,
Brooker.
yeah, and I had never listened to that podcast before, and this episode was with a guy named Callie Means.
Hmm.
And Pete, we've both seen a lot of the same movies, read a lot of the same books.
Hmm.
I can't remember everything you've read and watched, but I could tell you that I've read and watched just about every documentary,
Hmm.
read tons of books on this subject, on, mass production food system, chemical based farming, all those things. And then also the flip side, which we're trying to advocate, is, none of that, right? Like
Right, right.
cooking
Yes,
like
yes.
yeah, as Tim Peterson said, like your great grandma cooked, right?
Right, right, right.
And or maybe these days your great great grandma. And we know that World War II created this shift in
Hmm.
the food system. It was an unintended outcome in food and agriculture, I think, to feed the world, and we know that. And now, as opposed to having these two paths, let's feed the world, let's make sure no one's starving to death,
Right,
versus let's not kill people with the
right,
food we're giving them, which is what we're talking about. And this episode to me, it blew my mind. Like I was so I got so pissed off, but I was so interested.
yes, yes.
It reinvigorated in me the reasons we got started in this to begin with.
Yeah.
And just the fact that, you know, just a couple quick tidbits, and you probably have some as well from that episode, because we were like furiously texting each other, and while we were, at least while I was
Yeah,
listening
right,
to it, I
right.
was like, oh my God, I sent at least 10 people that episode
Hmm.
who aren't really interested in what we talk about, as they're not as passionate about
Yeah,
it. They're
sure.
interested in health and well-being, but they're not, you know, they're eating wherever. And
Right.
And I sent it to them, people I care about, and I said, just listen to the first 30 minutes. This will blow your mind, which is
Right.
what you said to me. And I listened to the whole episode, and it was fantastic. And I would recommend to all of our listeners to listen to the first 30 minutes. I think it's, let's see, it's episode, it's called the Ultimate Human, with Gary Brecka, Brecka, and it doesn't have an episode number, but it's basically it's called Exposing the Secrets of the Food and Healthcare Industry.
Yeah, and it's
With
from the September 10th episode. So
September 10th.
yeah,
Oh,
so if you
episode season one, episode 95.
yeah, yeah.
And it's an hour and a half, and it's the if you care about your well-being and health and your children or your loved ones, it's a worthwhile hour and a half. It will motivate you to change behavior. And that's what so but some of the things that really woke me up were the fact that as a problem, like the cigarette companies, when they started getting exposed for that being a health issue,
Right.
as opposed to what it was before, which was recommended by doctors to improve your health. And
Yeah.
then the Surgeon General comes out with his warning, and then the rest is history. So these massive companies, some of the most valuable
Hmm.
in the world, Philip Morris, RJ Reynolds, start investing, realizing that their cash cow is about to be severely regulated, um, start shifting to food
Right.
and buy companies like Heinz.
Right.
And I'm sitting here going, "Oh my God!" And he talks about it. This guy Callie Means is really sharp. The thing that I love about his story is that he his he was a lobbyist
Right.
for big food, and I think for big pharma, but
Yeah, I
definitely
think
for big
yeah.
food,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely for big food. And he was the one pitching that to Congress. He was lobbying, the federal government, advocating
Hmm.
for, these foods to have less regulations and blah, 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 these ultra processed foods. And then he realized what he was doing when his sister, who was a Stanford medical school grad,
Hmm.
at top of her class at Stanford Medical, pretty good, pretty sharp. And then she gets into it goes down the whole, residency, and
Right.
she starts doing a lot of this one particular type of surgery that you have to listen to the episode. And she's like, why am I doing so many of these? And then she starts like letting her patients know after doing so many of the same surgery that, hey, if you just eat this or that, you can reduce your risk of this recurring. And she got a lot of pushback from, the community she was working in because, uh, big pharma they want those issues, and so it's almost like the basic premise of this is that the food system is basically in cahoots with the pharmaceutical system, which we've known, but this guy distills it down, makes it very clear and understandable. And basically, that's how our society is set up now. We're eating
Right.
shit, and then they're treating it with this pharmaceutical.
And look, I don't have a conspiratorial bent. I mean, like
I
I
don't
don't
either. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't have like necessarily this is a product of some grand design.
No.
However, I mean it's a law of business, right? I mean, University of Chicago, I think, created this, or maybe I forget who was the origin of this particular statement, but it's like show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior. And we
Hmm.
know diabetes is, you know, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of business every year. And so that incentive will, that the incentive to make that money won't diminish, right? Somebody somewhere is like trying to figure out how do I grow my business if my business is the treatment of diabetes with pick your, with
Hmm.
drugs or so on and so forth. That incentive is present in the society. And so you're relating back to you is that whatever incentives are present in making our bread a certain way, adding all of these, if the cigarette companies have control of food products, then they surely are taking the learnings of things that are addictive,
Hmm.
grow your sales in a
Hmm.
way that things that are not addictive don't grow your sales. If
Correct.
you have one cigarette and that means that you want the second cigarette,
Hmm.
you could think of potato chips as if, the potato chip that leads you to the next potato chip is more valuable than the potato chip that goes, you know what, that was terrific, that was delicious, and that's enough. If you pick between those two business models, it's obvious. And so when I come back and I tell you how I felt, this to me is an outcome of two systems that have different types of incentives. And look, when we look at our society over the last 125 years, if we go from 1900 to 1950, a physician might feel or might see 1% of their population being pre-diabetic. And as I understand it right now, we're somewhere around half the country is pre-diabetic. I do not believe the willpower of the US population changed from 1950 to today, and I don't think that the population living from 1900 to 1950 were thinking, oh, I need to protect myself from becoming pre-diabetic and ultimately diabetic. It has to be that the environments are totally different.
Hmm.
That just the natural behaviors of people have to be similar. So if you're in an environment where you're being served up something that's addictive for your eating, versus something that isn't designed as food not designed as a drug, those outcomes are entirely different. So if I had a tough time not linking those ideas in my head when I came back.
Yeah, and you're right. I agree with you that there's, if you or I were to go spend time working at craft food service
Hmm.
or Heinz or whatever these whatever these food conglomerates are, I'm sure there's really good people there who are just driven to be successful in what they're doing,
Right.
and maybe don't understand the implications of what they're doing. But I think on the pharmaceutical side, one of the things that Cali Means talks about is giving Americans a choice and regulating the HSA, FSA thing so that, which I'm a big proponent of. I've had an HSA as part
And
of my
where
health.
and what's that? What's the
So it's a
HSA
health
FS?
savings account.
Okay.
So the nice thing about it is your premiums are lower. You're
Hmm.
still covered like with an HMO for like major
Catastrophic thing. Yeah.
stuff and some preventative stuff like dental and whatever. But it's a lower premium, and then you can divert the money you would have spent on a full HMO or PPO into your HSA account. And that is tax deductible. So
Hmm.
it's pre-tax money going in there, and it's an incentive for you. So you have like a debit card,
Right.
and that debit card can be used for a masseuse,
Right. Yeah.
anything that's going to help your wellness, right? A chiropractor.
Hmm.
And for me, I've used it for naturopaths.
Right.
So,
Yes.
I first started with Maggie and then shifted over to another naturopath here in Scottsdale. And and then I use the HSA card for, some supplements, natural supplements that they asked
Hmm.
me to buy, and I use the HSA card. So now I'm making choices with my money that I'm spending on, specifically spending for healthcare, on a way that I know to avoid pharmaceuticals, right? To
Right.
avoid pharmaceuticals. And the naturopath explains what each one does and what it's going to do to my body and how it's all interconnected. And I learn how to eat properly and all those things.
Hmm.
So to me, that's a huge, so he has solutions. It's not just this bitch fest about, oh, everything's bad and somebody needs to figure it out. He's figuring it out.
I,
Him and his sister wrote a book. I bought the book. I haven't listened to it yet.
yeah.
I think it's called Good Energy. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that sounds right. But I mean, what you're talking about in my mind, like when we talk about healthcare, versus sick care. I mean, if you
Hmm.
were attending to yourself to keep from getting sick versus like once you're sick, in some senses, once you've crossed the line into illness, you're now in sick care versus that. And so
Right.
the FSA, HSA as a tool to keep yourself from getting sick, I think is a useful social um, program, right? In the sense that, like,
Hmm.
rather than only offering insurance. And look, I mean, when I look at my local experience from, let's just stay with pizza for a second. If I go down to Source, and shout out to our friend Claudia there, who
Hmm.
actually is Italian himself, by the way, and I have pizza that he makes and the bread that he makes, it's the closest analogy that I can offer to my experience in Rome and Florence. I mean, when I have pizza from the source that Claudio and the team makes for me, I come away with a very different physical feeling than
Hmm.
if I had had something made by, a chain or, I mean, not to throw any specific producer under the bus, but it's just something that my body responds to very, very differently.
Hmm.
Um, Now, I have had many conversations with Claudia over there where, people come in and they're trying to understand, like, well, why is this pizza more expensive than other
Hmm.
types of pizza? Why you trying to get into a conversation about his bread? Like, well, he doesn't have a slicer over there. So just talking about like, why is this bread more expensive or not served to me in a plastic bag or whatnot? And some people listen and are converts, and then other people I don't think can get past the economics.
Right.
And listen, I say that with all due respect. Like, not things are expensive currently that protect your health versus the least expensive food is often the food that will cost you the most in the long run,
Yes.
as in terms of what you'll spend repairing your health or recovering from
Well,
illness.
yeah, and that's a perfect example of why we're doing what we're doing.
Yes, yeah.
Our mission has always been, while we've been working together, to show the average, consumer in our community,
Hmm.
that how you can eat with better foods and better ingredients, smaller portion sizes, still feel satiated, but also not feel like crap and not be putting yourself closer to closer to the grave every
Yes,
time you
yeah.
eat. I'm reading Marcus Aurelius right now, Meditation. So, I'm starting to become more of a stoic. Thanks, Pete. And so so every day we're dying, right?
Right.
So every day is death. So if we look at it that way, the one thing we've talked about the blue zones before, it's let's die better,
Hmm.
right? Let's die happy. Let's not die. I I was in a and it was really sad. I work in I part of what I do is construction,
Hmm.
and they need a senior living facility. That was like kind of like one of those where it's like they need constant care,
Right.
the
Yes, yes.
elderly folks who are there.
Right.
I'd never been in one.
Hmm.
And they obviously have a cafeteria there or food service facility, and we had to go in and give them a quote. And it was so sad to me. It was so sad how some of those folks were living out their 80s and 90s. And then you read the book Blue Zones
Hmm.
or read the articles from National Geographic, and you see these regions where at 90 years old they look like they're 65 or 70 and they feel like it.
Yes.
So whether you want to live to 100 or not, or 105,
Right. Right.
to me it's about the quality of life, right? Like if I'm going to live till I'm 95, I hope I do. That would be great. But I
Yeah.
don't want to be in a senior living facility,
Yes.
with tubes hooked up to me. I want to be enjoying my life, whatever my body will allow me to do physically, but I want to be able to sit outside, eat what I want to eat. And I see a lot of 80, 90-year-olds who do that. I've known some who have lived very well to 95 or 100 and not had all the ailments and constantly in and out of the hospital. But what we see going back to the Callie Means interview is that that's actually the intent of the way the system is set up right now is pretty much to give you a life dependent on pharmaceuticals. Our society, basically, here in the United States, is set up that way. And the only way to combat that is through good food. And
Right.
so, yeah, so it just reinforced my desire to bring these to more consumers, bring these
Right.
products to
Yeah, I
more
mean
consumers.
that those terms like health span and lifespan, that you want your health span and your lifespan to be equal. The guy who founded CrossFit, a guy named Greg Glassman, um, was like, hey, you don't want to be warehoused the last 20 years of your life. You don't
Hmm.
want to spend 75 to 95. Yes, you're alive, but what's going on in
Right.
your life? And I think to me that's a terrifying prospect. And the term that when I think of my own exit from life is compression of morbidity. And what that expression means is that you live, you're going, and then you die. Like
Hmm.
that you want you don't want to spend a ton of time dying. You
Hmm.
want to go, and then it's over. And I think that the chemical advances in, well, what does it mean to keep the body alive, and to keep, a microbial death from happening? I mean, like if you get a bacterial or virus infection, we have a lot of tools to preserve your life. And then we have a lot of science that will keep the body alive, regardless of its, ability to function out there in the world. Um, and I think that those tools have their place, but if you are degrading the quality of the body, and keeping it alive, people can spend a lot of years, with a very poor quality of life. And the antidote, has to start with the food. I think the food is
Sure.
95% of it. And then, of course, you have to keep the system strong. So, I mean, I'm a big advocate for exercise too, but, you can't out exercise. There's no way to get around the notion that if you're not eating properly, and we're not saying anything here that is exactly a news flash. I mean, this is kind of present, but the Italian trip for me just brought it into stark relief
Hmm.
of like, in an environment in which the system around me is set up to protect me from things I can't see and may not know about, I felt different, and then my first meal when I came back to the United States, I was bloated immediately after I ate it.
Hmm.
And it, I wasn't eating anything crazy. It wasn't like a, fast food. It was at a just an ordinary restaurant, and my system immediately reacted to the food
Hmm.
differently. So when we talk about these things that many, maybe all people are familiar with, I got the compare and contrast thing given to me over the course of like 24 hours. I
Yeah.
ate pizza on day X in Italy, and I came back and had, it was just a chicken and rice and type of meal. But what was present in whatever I was having there made my body react in an inflamed and
You ate
bloated manner.
American rice? What are you nuts? No, I'm just kidding. No, but that's a great example, Pete. That's just reality, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced what you've been experienced, but not been so conscious about it,
Yeah.
like not thought about it. You
Hmm.
you think about these things, so you're aware of it. Where others may write it off to jet lag when they come home,
Hmm.
or, I must have eaten something on the plane or at the airport,
Yeah.
like, but what you're doing is you're coming into back to your toxic food system where you literally, and we talk about how to access these foods. I think if we're doing anything with this podcast and with our mission is to try to encourage more people to bring these foods to the public, right? Like, I know there's a lot of people doing great things out there, but Whole Foods is not going to save America,
Right,
right?
right,
Whole
right.
Foods is going to save 1% of America maybe, but I don't shop at Whole Foods. Like, there's no way. And
Right.
and then you have to ask yourself, as much as I admire what Amazon has done, as far as being a disruptor and all that. I mean, they bought Whole Foods for a reason, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't to downsize it. It's an extension of Amazon. And so, I don't trust. I haven't trusted Whole Foods since, and I used to work for Whole Foods, by the way,
Oh, I didn't know that.
in my youth. Yeah,
Huh.
before it was Whole Foods, in the East Coast, it was called Fresh Fields, and then Whole Foods acquired it. So,
Okay.
but it was the same exact concept.
Sure.
Anyway, so the I've never trusted it. It's just, to me, it's just the same bullshit that you buy at every other grocery store, packaged better with some fancy wording, and it's way more expensive. It's all the same shit. And
Well,
so I'm not trying to disparage Whole Foods. I'm just saying that what their mission may have started as, it's not that now. So to just blindly go into Whole Foods and assume you're doing yourself good, you still have to pay attention at a place like Whole Foods. So
so
if you have to pay attention to Whole Foods, you got to pay attention everywhere.
So let's take a step off our soapbox for a second and talk about, like, as we kind of head towards the conclusion here. Like, we're proud of some of the things that are going on in Arizona.
Yeah.
And there are things in Arizona happening that are aligned with this perspective of what you're producing food wise, matters a lot. I mean, when we talk to Tim Peterson at Arizona Grass Raised Beef, I mean, his intent is to put a product in front of people that is absent the chemicals, the drugs, the things that are
Hmm.
present in a commodity product that is coming from people who are raising cattle in a way we don't like. So I mean,
Right.
and Tim's the first to say, like, it's a more expensive product. I mean, I know that in projects that you're currently working on, you're mindful of not just creating something that has a certain flavor profile, but also has a certain sort of set of ingredients that mimics what I've experienced in other countries. I mean, you want to
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
absolutely. So, I mean, we have quite a few folks who are working on great things here. Tim Peterson at Arizona Grass
Hmm.
Raised Beef. By the way, I buy the tallow now in the jars
Okay.
from him. I would highly recommend you do it. Like,
Okay.
it's really good. It's clean tasting. I don't know why. Like, maybe it's because we made our own tallow before, but
Right.
it was it was kind of greasy. I mean, it's oil, but
Yeah. Right.
like
Right. Right.
it
Yeah.
didn't have that clean feeling when we made it ourselves.
That's interesting.
They do a great job with the tallow. I mean, we just have the jar sitting there right by the stove and use it for everything, eggs,
Oh, no kidding.
vegetables,
Okay.
everything. It's really, I mean, to me, it's way better than cooking with olive oil or anything.
Okay. Probably has
So
this
I would
high smoking point. You probably can really, like, cook
Yeah,
that
and
way
it
in a
and it
way that, yeah.
just it's a clean taste. It
Hmm.
doesn't do anything to the food. You preserve the the core flavor profile of the food you're cooking. It
Yeah.
doesn't overwhelm it like you'd
Okay.
think it would, right?
Right.
But they do a great job with it. So anyway, um, Don Guerra, Barrio Bread in Tucson, as you know, I collaborated with him
Yes.
on a project to produce his bagel, which is called Barrio Bagel, and it's a long fermented sourdough bagel, no sugar, and he's doing really well with it actually. So, it was a collaboration with Chompy's. Chompy's, who's a local bagel,
Hmm.
they have retail outlets, restaurants, but they also have they manufacture bagels for themselves, for grocery stores, etc. So they produce the bagel for him. He sells it, and now I'm working with him to help him actually put that into a brick and mortar up here in the valley.
Oh, no kidding.
And yeah, and then that's why the pizza thing's interesting because the same idea there. So, here you're having a bagel that I wouldn't classify as a traditional New York bagel, but it's a great bagel,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah. Right.
And if you're not, you're from New York, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes, I
I
am.
don't mean to offend you here, Pete, but
Okay.
New Yorkers are very proud of their bagels, and
It's
I
true.
get it.
Hmm.
The New York bagel is, it's where it started here in the States, and I get it. And they're proud of their pizza too. But if you take away the nostalgic part of a bagel, um, and you just say, this is a convenient vessel for me to to absorb my nutrients. Like
Right.
if I'm comparing the bagel to an English muffin or
Yeah, right.
toast
Hmm.
or whatever, if I don't have the capacity to go buy a, 10, 12, $14 loaf of bread from Don, and I want something that's affordable and easy and that I'm used to, the
Right.
bagel's a great alternative. It's
I agree.
accessible,
Hmm.
right? So, and it's a great bagel. It tastes good. It's got a large format, so you can put a lot of stuff on it. It's got a lot of surface area, and it's good for you. And it's using Sonoran white wheat and all the great things that we love about Don. And then he has a pizza. You spoke of the
Yes.
source. So he does pizza pop-ups from his bakery
Oh,
in
that's right.
Tucson.
Yeah. Hmm.
And he's doing a Sicilian style pizza, which is similar to a Roman style pizza. It's a pre-baked sheet, basically a focaccia,
Right.
which is
Yes. Yes.
delicious on its own. And now
Yeah.
you're topping it with sauce and cheese and whatever else you're putting on there. And he's got some great toppings. And so that Sicilian style pizza, the nice thing about it is you pre-make it and then you can easily cook them by the slice.
Hmm.
And so he's looking to make that a part of his brick and mortar up here as well. So here you have the ability to have somebody who would normally maybe go to Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's for breakfast and still be spending 7, 8, $9 if they're getting coffee and whatever they get from there.
Right.
And I mean, easily. So I don't think you're walking out of any of those places anymore. Maybe I'll go do some test runs, but you're not walking out of there for $2 or $3 anymore.
No,
It's a
no. Right.
$7 to $10 breakfast ordeal, and lunch is like 12, $13.
Yeah.
And so he's creating that same menu pricing format, actually less expensive with all these great foods that don't have all the additives. And so that's the type of thing that we need to see more of is people like Don Guerra who went through this transformation from commodity flour in his business
Right.
um, to local organic grains, heritage grains that promote a better ecology here in Arizona. And so he consciously made that decision, even though it cost a lot on his bottom line. He did that, and now he's more successful than he could ever imagine.
Right. And you and I like this term virtuous cycle. I mean,
Hmm.
part of what I'm excited about the projects that you're doing with Don is that um, present in in that system is this underlying economic mechanism of there's amazing wheat grown in Arizona that is in line with what we've been talking about, how it's grown, how it's produced, what's not in it in terms of chemicals and the additives that hurt us. So we're, unconsciously, the purchase of this bagel has this impact on our local economy. And then more importantly for me, just emotionally, is the notion that if you're going to, eat a bagel, not all bagels are created equal. You will love the flavor with Don's Guerra. You will probably be buying it because it's delicious. But then
Hmm.
underpinning that experience is an improvement in your health. I mean, instead of it being something that degrades your health, this is something that supports you in that it has a different nutrition profile. I mean, we've talked about Joel Salatin a lot in terms of eggs. Like if you looked at Salatin's egg from where he grows his chickens and
Hmm.
one that comes off the shelf of a commodity, in a in a grocery store, you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at them. But if you measure the nutritional profile of those two eggs, they are not the same. And
Well, and the
so,
cooking profile is not the same.
the
Yeah.
cooking profile, the flavor profile, and the nutritional profile are different there. So when I think about a bagel, in a similar manner, like um, if you're a bagel eater, you can be eating things that, work against you. And in this case, there's all these wonderful virtuous things that are kind of built into going and getting your breakfast. And then if the economics turn out to be a wash, um, now we're talking about habits. Dunkin' Donuts has been a part of people's lives forever.
Right.
We can shift that focus to other
Well,
things.
if you talk about economics, you know, I'm we're both in our 50s. But
Right.
when I turned 50, it was like there was a big switch in my mindset. It was just automatic. I don't know why. I've always been conscious of my health and well-being, but I've never been like overboard, like
Hmm.
all about it. I care about good food, but I love to cook. But it really flipped the switch in me, and the I really started thinking about why how I'm going to live the rest of my life. Like
Right.
I know you and I have talked about this. We're both going to be working. We're going to
Yes.
drop dead at work, whatever at
Probably.
work
Yes.
is
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be 90
Hmm.
working somewhere.
Right.
And so you and I have both been very aggressive in our pursuits, and as a result, we'll be working for a long time.
Yes.
So, point being, when you do the mathematical calculation in your mind, everybody does it a little differently. It really comes down to a value proposition, right? Like
Yes.
if we speak of value, then I would encourage our listeners and I encourage people I know all the time to look at the value of that product and your longevity. And I know that sounds like, maybe a little, I don't know, like foofy or whatever you want to call it, but it's like, no, like once you cross that mark and you're like, okay, shit, the timer's going the other way now. The sand glass is like, you
Right.
start
Right.
getting
Right.
anxious, right? Now it's like, okay, a couple years matter. And if I can buy a bagel and eat a bagel daily or a piece of bread or pizza or whatever it is, and I know it's not going to take me quicker to the point of being dependent on the medical industry to help me live the rest of my life. If it's, then that's worth it. And
And Oren, I'll tell you right now, and for the people who are listening to us, this is one of my promises to you if you decide you want to listen to Oren and I over time, is that that choice um, is not, we are going to show you that that choice to pick the things that are better for you is not just a choice, it's not a sacrifice.
Mhm.
What we are going to talk about and what we are going to amplify and introduce people to new things is that the choice for the Don Guerra bread and bagel is also the highest and best choice from a flavor and enjoyment perspective. And so, back 10 million years ago when you were working for Fresh Fields, back when you rode the dinosaur into work or where, I know, I'm older than you, so I was probably at the crosswalk waving you through on that the notion of like health food had this sense of sacrifice of
Yes.
flavor and enjoyment.
Yep.
But what I'm, really excited for our conversations to do is to lead people to Don Guerra and the source and the places in which they're going to find that what's best for you is also producing the best experience. And that so many choices when it comes to food are, centered around habit and accommodation over time. You've been going to the same places. And I'm hoping that when people, if they're unfamiliar with Don Guerra's bread, if they're unfamiliar with the source down at the Epic Center, that they, then go and mindfully give that a shot because it's going to be surprising that what's best for you also is the most enjoyable over time.
And seek it out. I would say that, maybe kind of an additional point on what you were mentioning about healthy eating.
Hmm.
I would say the starting point is non-toxic eating,
Yeah,
right?
yes,
Like
right.
let's avoid toxicity to start. Maybe that is just the starting point of like, okay, I don't want to eat potassium bromate anymore. Like this is
Right.
probably putting me in the grave quicker, or at least sending me towards some sort of pharmaceutical that's going to have side effects
Yeah,
and then will lead to whatever. Referring back to the episode, The Ultimate Human with Callie Means, he talks a lot. He goes into, what his sister learned because he collaborates with his sister now, and I'm excited to read the book. I don't want to recommend it yet,
right.
Good
Yeah, let's
Energy,
wait till we
but
read it. Yeah.
I want to read it, and I'm going to listen to it starting soon. Um, but just avoiding toxicity in our foods is probably a good place to start. So even if you don't want to take that extra step to go find a Don Guerra or the pub pretzel from Oatman
Yeah,
Farm
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
at Arizona Wilderness. Arizona Wilderness, you may not have those in your community. We do, and I don't go there nearly as much as I'd like to.
Hmm.
So uh, the point is avoiding toxicity maybe is a good first step. And then starting to seek out better foods, like how if you're going to make pizza dough at home, at least seek out a flour that's non-toxic.
Right, right,
And
right.
remember when they made crayons non-toxic? And it says it like right on the box.
Yeah,
These are non-toxic, and you're like, thank God. Oh shit, I can't believe I survived my youth.
right.
You know, and
Yeah, imagine how smart we would have been if we had, not been eating those toxic crayons and all the secondhand smoke in my. I probably would have
yeah.
been a Nobel Prize winner with the brain God gave me. But
So, but imagine if bread had, you could put non-toxic on there only if you didn't have potassium bromate in it,
yeah, yeah.
and then, you could label your bread as non-toxic. How much of a shock would that be to the grocery store
And I,
shopper?
and I
Like,
think it should be the other way around. Like, I don't think we should be labeling things organic. We should be labeling things inorganic. Like, organic should be the
yeah,
standard, and non-toxic bread shouldn't be labeled as such. Toxic bread should be labeled
that,
as
but
bread.
but the average look, I'm just speaking from my own perspective, of course, but I think the
Right.
average consumer is going to be like, like me,
Hmm.
who or my wife, who if you see toxic or if you see non-toxic on anything,
Right.
then it's going to say, oh, okay, I need to be careful with this product because there's obviously toxic products out there.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Like
Right.
if there's a non-toxic crayon, then somebody's selling a toxic crayon. So I need to now I need now you're you've been it's kind of in your consciousness, like you're kind of looking for that. And we need to have some sort of mechanism that allows for that in the general consumer, is understanding that, you know, because I do it, I shop on price when I'm at the
Sure.
grocery store because I'm in an environment that promotes that. But when you go to Don Guerra's bakery to Barrio Bread, it's not about price. You don't give a shit about the price. It's about which loaf am I going to choose and why. Oh, well, this is emmer wheat. Okay, well, what's an emmer wheat? Well, it's got a different flavor profile. This is a red fife. Well, why would I want red fife
Right.
over this? You start learning about, and it becomes more about what you like and a personal preference. They're all good for you. They're all relatively the same price. But Diana and I fell in love with a bread of his called einkorn. It's the original grain. It's the
That's
first
interesting.
grain that humans harvested
What?
and cultivated. Yeah,
Okay.
and he makes a bread out of einkorn that is like literally like when you think of like the old world, it's
Yeah.
like let's break bread together. Like that's what this is. And it's very dense, but it is absolutely delicious. And you feel healthy with every bite. Like it's like, oh my God, this is actually, I
This is
feel like this is
nourishment.
extending my life. And so it's really wonderful. And I love eating his breads. And when you talk about cost, and I'll finish on this little note. We've been soapboxing a lot today, but the when I have his breads, yes, they're expensive. It's like a $12, $13 loaf of bread, but it lasts me like 2 or 3 weeks. I
Yeah.
mean, I eat one slice a morning. I have a bread knife. I just slice off that slice, wrap it up, put it back in the fridge because otherwise it'll get moldy. There's no preservatives in it. And then throw it in a toaster. My naturopath advised grass-fed, grass-finished butter, which I
Hmm.
use now. Put a little butter on it, and I'm satiated for the morning. And I'm a big eater. Okay, I can eat a big breakfast burrito, but I don't need that when I eat this bread.
Yeah.
And I feel good until lunch. And so when you look at the cost of that, that $13 loaf is probably costing me about 80 cents a day for
Yeah, that's
breakfast.
interesting. Yeah. So, look, you and I, this is a topic that this podcast can go on for 30 hours because we
Let's
feel
do it,
so
man.
straight. So either we tell
I'm
people to
I'm
sit
fired
down
up.
and buckle in. But I would let's do this. Let's just make a promise to the people listening. Like we are going to point out things in not just Arizona. We'll surely be talking to people around the country and the world, but we're gonna alert you to things you should go explore and uh, and to try to be mindful, like the fact that you have that loaf down to what's the per day cost, you have to have a sense that that's worth measuring. The Wonder Bread loaf that might, cost a fraction of that, but you would eat 10 of them,
Hmm.
that the economics of the best bread actually work in your favor. And we know the health profile and the flavor profile work in your favor too. So, we're going to spend time calling attention to chefs, to agriculture, to places to eat, to people producing amazing different things across the board. We're going to talk about it in spirits and wine, in pizza and sandwiches and beef and chicken. There's lots and lots of places that are doing great work. And Oren, I think the way to get those prices competitive with the commodities is to build the market. And so when we create larger opportunities for the things that are being made in the best manner possible, those things become more sustainable. And, as a society, if we can shift the spending to billions of dollars spent on diabetes care to billions of dollars spent, procuring, developing, and buying the right foods, we're just going to be a happier, better country.
Well, yeah, and just practically speaking, I just did the math. So people used to complain about our eggs being $8 a
Oh,
dozen,
yeah, yeah.
right? So
Yep.
$8 a dozen, 12 eggs, right? So let's just say, Pete, now I know you wouldn't do this because there's a thing with you and eggs,
Yeah.
but that's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Guilty.
But let's just say, a lot of people eat an egg or two for breakfast. So if you
Hmm.
wanted to have one egg on the toast with butter,
Right.
a great local farm, non-soy, organic, free-range hen, beautiful egg, delicious egg, a buck 45 on Don's bread with butter.
Right.
A buck 45. Tell me anywhere that you can get a a good breakfast sandwich for a buck 45.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell. Look, we're gonna conclude this. So I'm gonna stop us, but I'm gonna tell you one story. I'm gonna tell you one story, and then that's it. I'm cutting us off. The My strength trainer, who's like a legendary strength trainer, his name's Sal Losi, he's like been all throughout the NFL, all throughout Division One. He happens to be local to me, and he's the guy I work with on my strength training. Uh, Now, at 54, you have to consider all your options for health, and some of it is like, do I testosterone replacement therapy? Do I dip my toe in that water or not? And I've elected not to. But um, there are stories between Sal and I of people who are eating eggs like yours from, that are out there eating as nature designed it, and their change in testosterone levels are as if they were on testosterone replacement therapy.
Interesting.
And the only difference between the people he and I are kind of been evaluating is those eggs. And I offer that to you. That's just an anecdote, although I know that these numbers are real because, we've been precise in our measurement of the folks we worked with in this regard. Um, that was the one change that they did in their life that all of a sudden boosted their health. So what I mean by that is the reason why I mentioned that story is that when we talk about virtuous cycles, it tasted the best, it, affected their health. They surely weren't thinking about it. And then there was this outcome that was better than if they had gone a pharmaceutical route to correct, a problem of low
Hmm.
testosterone or whatever. So your $1.45 bread also probably doesn't take into account that maybe if you're a male over 50, you don't need testosterone replacement dollars being
Well,
spent there
yeah.
either, right?
Well, and not only that, but if you think of your health insurance premiums, a lot of people don't think about it because maybe their work covers their health insurance, which is
Right.
great. But do you know that like even an inexpensive health insurance policy here for a family is $20,000 a year?
It's amazing.
That's
It's yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
$20,000 a year. So it's no wonder why it's such a huge industry, you know. And so what is it going to be in 15, 20 years because we've got all these
yeah,
diabetics
yeah,
and everything that we're dealing with because of the poor food system, you know, what is it going to be 40,000 a year? You know, so you can't do that. We have to reverse that trend.
yeah.
And, you know, it really comes out of your pocketbook one way or the other.
Yes.
And, you know, we just have to help people understand how to do it, you know, without a huge waste of their time
Hmm.
and money, you know, where you
Yeah.
can make it effortless and affordable and all that. So more to come, of course.
Yes, more to come. All right, brother. I love talking to you about this. And for the listeners, if you made it to the end of the episode, we're gonna point out a lot of things that are gonna make your life better in ways that are gonna be obvious and ways that will play out over time.
All right. Make sure you go listen to that podcast episode.
Oh yeah,
The
September 10th, Gary Brecka, The Ultimate Human. It's
The
awesome.
Ultimate Human.
Yeah.
Good episode.
All right, brother.
All right, Pete. Take care, man. Have
Take
some
care.
pizza.